Welcome, new and old friends. I just have a couple things to say, and then the stories will begin. Before you drift off into the dream realm, please remember to like, subscribe, share, and comment. If you'd like to find out about my social links, my website, how to help the channel, check the description box. Now turn off your lights, make sure your doors and windows are locked. It's time to dream. Pennsylvania woods have a problem, by Anonymoose. It was 2009-ish. I was living on the road for 2 years, hitchhiking and riding trains. I was a dumb 18 to 19-year-old. I had been all over the country, West Coast multiple times, Southwest, and decided to see the East Coast. Went to Florida and went to a small festival there. It's called the Rainbow Gathering. They're kind of like a big meetup for traveling kids, old hippies, tramps, those kinds of people. They're always in state parks or national parks. Rangers will patrol it and police sometimes show up, but for some reason it's allowed. Not sure how, but these have been going on since the 70s, I think. Some people who show up are hardcore train hopper, gutter punk types, and some are the super chill Christians who will wash your feet. It's a very unusual festival. There are small regional gatherings and a big national gathering where thousands of people show up. Kind of the poor man's Burning Man. Huge fire pit gets dug out, elaborate lanterns, hundreds of drum circles, free food is constantly made from kitchens where are just camps devoted to making food for all of us bums. Well, I met some friends at a smaller regional one in Florida. We parted ways, never thinking I was going to see them again. One was named Anna, and we sort of hit it off. I hitchhiked north all the way to upstate New York when I caught wind of the national gathering, which was going to be in Pennsylvania. I figured I might as well go. I got to the gathering early in the Almost-Jaded National Park and helped set up, trying to meet people, kind of looking for my group, not sure I was going to be camping. One day I ran into Anna, who I had met in Florida. Me and her had some spiritual conversations in Florida, talking about fairies and UFOs. She had some unusual stuff happen to her when she was a kid. So her and her buddy had just gotten to PA, and we decided the three of us were going to team up. We noticed a ton of people showing up to this thing. It was getting really crowded, so we decided to move camp to a more remote area. We chose a spot off the main trail, which goes from the parking lot to the gathering. It's a couple miles long, and there's a lot of foot traffic going up and down, people going in and out of the festival, but we had some space. This happened around dusk. Me and Anna were sitting by our one little twig fire, stone cold sober. Alcohol isn't really allowed at a gathering. It does still get in, but there's a camp at the parking lot called A Camp where all the drinkers stay. There's of course other drugs at these festivals, and me and Anna and her friend just weren't into that whole drum circle scene. We had just gotten done having a deep talk about spirituality when we started to feel hungry and stood up to start heading down to the main circle, which is where someone can get one big meal a day. We're standing up and Anna says, "Hey, do you hear that?" And I said, "No." And I just keep putting out the fire with my foot, and she was like, "Oh no, hey, shh, listen." So I stopped and I could hear the sound of someone walking through the forest. The thing that was weird about it was that it was coming from a direction where there was no festival. So the festival was down below us about a half mile if we were looking down the trail, And this sounded like it was coming from our left, where it's just hundreds of miles of Pennsylvania woods. The parking lot is way up the trail a few miles behind us. It was odd because it sounded like a person speed walking towards us. I didn't think deer because they wouldn't be coming up to a fire pit. I generally thought it was just some lost hippie. As the sound was getting closer, there were some people walking down the trail and some walking up the trail. There's a weird custom called Nick and Night. If you yell Nick and Night, a dude with a tin can full of tobacco will come find you and roll you a cigarette. There's about 10 of them walking around, and their sole job is to maintain everyone's nicotine habit. They get a ton of donations from a camp. So anyways, these two groups run into a Nick and Night kid, and now they're all standing together on the main trail, talking about 10 meters below us, oblivious to us. So while this is happening to our right and below us, the sound of someone walking from the left has gotten so close that she'd be seeing who or what it was, and there wasn't anything there. I was frozen, kinda stuck in a state of confusion, and I think Anne was too. No fear, just why aren't we seeing it? We could visibly see leaves and dirt being kicked up, like there was an invisible person or power walking by. Whatever it was, it went right up to that group of people in the main trail and didn't stop. But it slowed down like it was checking them out. They were totally oblivious to this. They were all smoking, talking, and laughing. It kinda did a turn as it went up to them, and then suddenly did a straight line towards me and Anna. Anna had a keychain with a million things on it, and she was frantically looking for this mini flashlight she had on it. It was dusk, so not bright out, but still light enough that we could see the footfalls and debris being kicked up. My mind was thinking there's a squirrel or a field mouse hopping on the forest floor or something. The forest floor was covered in dead leaves, but these steps were quick, as if there was a child or a small person walking fast. It's hard to explain while writing. This thing came right up to us. I'm staying to the right of our smoldering fire, and Anna's to the left. I could hear her just struggling with this keychain. It came right up to me, probably 5 or 6 feet away. There was nothing there. It did the same thing with the group. It slowed its pace like it was checking us out, like a slow trot. As it went by Anna and said, "Hey," and shone the light where it was, nothing to see. Whatever this thing was took off to the hills. Just absolutely took off. It was so fast. The foothills became like a machine gun. If I had wanted to run after it, I couldn't have. A second later, me and Anna took off running in the opposite direction, past the group, and just kept going until we were at the bottom. Funny things happen. There's people at these gatherings who spend the whole month naked. They'll roll around in the mud and just look like mud people for the whole festival. One of these people we had seen around was this 7-foot giant of a man, probably 400 pounds, naked, covered in mud and leaves. Me and Anna in full flight mode, and at that point it's dark. We run right into the guy. Scared us so bad. Anna screamed and we all started laughing, and that sort of canceled out the panic. We went to find our other friend, and it was weird because Anna was very scared. She kept saying it was because of her. Like she had a weird fairy/alien situation happen to her as a kid with her mom, and she felt like whatever this was because of her. I don't know, but she did not want to talk about it after, and I could never get her to elaborate. Me and the other friend, we were all about it. We went back up there. Anna said she wasn't going and wanted us to pack up the tent. And we sort of hung out, tried to look for tracks with our lights, listened, and nothing happened. I've gone from thinking it was an alien, like a gray, to a ghost. Or maybe a fairy or a gnome. One person said it could have been a pellywig. They're little Native American gnome things that are tricksters and can turn invisible. They're supposed to be in that area, so I don't know. My wife has always warned me about her psychopathic twin sister who wanted her dead, so when she came home bloody and asked me to help her hide the body, I knew she'd been forced to defend herself. If nothing more, that day brought us closer together than ever. She even helped me explore more of my darker impulses that I've tried to hide. My grandpa visited me in my dreams. By I Love 901. Basically, lately I've been curious about my grandpa who died when I was 5 years old. I'm 34 now. I have been asking my grandma what kind of person he was, his traits and personality, because I don't really remember anything of him, unfortunately. Then I asked my mom the same question and got some information about him, but they both mentioned that he was very happy and loved me very much. Sadly, I don't remember any of this. So after all these days and weeks passed, I've had a very vivid dream with him. The dream goes like this. For some reason, I'm sitting with my grandma in their house, and she is telling me to go to their bedroom because my grandpa wants to see me. I said to her, "What the fuck are you talking about? Grandpa is dead." She replied to go and see him in the bed, because he wants to talk to me. Then I proceed and I go to the bedroom and I see a figure like a wrapped mummy laying on the bed with the face of my grandpa, but sort of blurry and looked slightly slimmer than the photos with a weird neck. Anyway, as long as I walk in the door, the conversation starts. Him. "Hey, you've grown so much. You know I missed you, but don't worry about me. I'm doing alright." I didn't remember if I said something, and then he said, "Come here." So I went to him and lay over and hugged him. He repeated that he missed me, and his hugs was very warm. I actually felt his presence in my dream, and the next moment I was awake feeling weird and happy at the same time. End of the story. What do you guys think of this? I watched my little brother die, but since he's still walking around like normal, no one seems to believe me. I can only hope that that thing wearing his skin doesn't realize that I know. My Haunted House by Anonymoose. When I first came to this house, it was a dream come true. But not long after I moved in, strange things started happening. I remember, just for reference, I moved in on July of 2021. The 1st of September, I was here, I was getting ready for work, and I heard as clear as day my name being called right outside my bedroom door, which was open. So I would have seen it there with someone. But there was absolutely no one. Mind you, I was alone. In the house, if I had to pinpoint the most haunted room, it would be this one bedroom, where some days later I was going up the stairs and I swear I saw a black apparition running from the hallway all the way in that one bedroom. For those reasons, but also just because something in that room made me feel uncomfortable, I avoided in there. Although in the summer it is the coldest room in the house, so at some point last summer when it was dreadfully hot, I went in there. And at some point I fell asleep, and I had the most terrifying dream, but it definitely did not feel like a dream at all. I saw an old woman standing right above me and watching me sleep. So I looked up at her, but she didn't say anything, and then she slowly started approaching me with her hand, as if she wanted to touch me, but only with one finger. And right when she touched me, I woke up covered with sweat. I swear I felt that touch, and that's what woke me up. Needless to say, I ran out of that room as fast as possible. Also, throughout the years, I kept hearing doors opening and closing. And on top of that, I have heard a lot of times loved ones calling me when they're not even in the house. But that hasn't happened only to me, but to all my family members as well. We all have heard each other's voices calling us when we aren't in the house. And lastly, but not so long ago, the house phone rang, and when I picked it up, I heard a really awful, deep, raspy voice. I couldn't really understand what it was saying, but I know for a fact it was the exact voice that called my name then outside my bedroom door. As microplastics destroy the reproductive organs of the majority of the population, fertile women became the world's rarest and most valuable resource. When my little sister began to menstruate, my parents saw a way to save the family business and sold the rights to her body, due the day she turned 18. Unexplainable interaction I had with a stranger while working at a conservation area. By mullighanisdog. True story from 6 to 7 years ago while I was working as a security guard at a conservation area just outside city limits. It was the middle of the day, broad daylight. I was hanging out at the front gate with some other staff just killing time. I saw that there was a lone rider approaching the gatehouse from the access road. He was completely shirtless, wearing only black pants and shoes, and was on a black BMX. The rider then proceeds past the gatehouse to the exit lane, bypassing the drop-down security gate. I get in my work truck and drove out to stop him and get him to turn around and pay. I caught up to him a fair ways past the gate and requested that he pulled over. At first he just ignored me and continued to pedal towards the center of the park. He was a weird-looking guy, but not totally out of the usual. I remember he was very clean. No tattoos, no scars, no visible dirtiness, and not even any noticeable body hair. He was a skinny, maybe 20 to 30-year-old. He wore only black, which included his blackout BMX. Eventually he pulled over and I spoke to him about the vehicle. He was very belligerent and clearly didn't want to hear it from me. He eventually turned himself around, but not after saying some weird stuff about God and prophecy. I can't recall exactly what. I followed him out, kept a relevant distance. We passed the gatehouse through the exit lane again and continued onto the access road. I remember that at some point on the access road, the rider got off his bike, raised both of his hands to the sun and started chanting something while doing a little dance with his hips. I just watched at this point as it was a little humorous, a bit strange. The rider then got back on his bike and left without further incident. I didn't get his name and none of the staff at the gatehouse recognized him, so no one even identified who he was. I thought the interaction was definitely weird, but I didn't think anything else of it until I went to check the gatehouse surveillance. There were 3 cameras at the gatehouse, one watching the front access road, one watching the exit lane, and one watching the rear access road past the gatehouse. The rider would have entered the view of all 3 cameras, except we never once saw him. Every single camera experienced a technical malfunction at the exact moment that rider entered the frame. The camera literally froze in sequence as the rider entered, and then resumed like nothing happened as soon as the rider exited the frame. This occurred on the way back as well. This was the first time I'd seen the gatehouse cameras do something like that, and we've had vehicles constantly exiting past the gatehouse at a faster rate of speed than he was going, so I doubt the speed was a contributing factor to the tech issues. I truly have no idea what happened, but we were never able to get a photo of the guy and no one ever saw him again. Knowing how easily a wish can backfire, the wise young man simply asked the genie for more self-control. After 30 straight hours of manual breathing, the wise young man hanged himself. Too many damn coincidences that I can't ignore it and label it normal. By Embarrassed Lime 833. So 9% of my issue is mentioned in the title. We decided to stop our talking stage of 3 months since he moved to our country. We haven't spoken for 5 months now, but ever since I started talking to him, I've been seeing and hearing his name everywhere. It makes me feel good too, but I don't know if I should be feeling good about it and having expectations. It's also a psychological phenomenon according to Google apparently. But this is shocking. It's too much at this point. I entered a bookstore and see this book titled Waiting for Enter His Name, which I admit the truth I am waiting for him to return and ask me out to be his girlfriend. But why would I see this on that book? Then the constant Uber driver names and his name on vehicles, and then my mom happens to experience this too, seeing his name everywhere. We do love each other though. We miss each other, I can feel it, but how am I to make sense of it? The book is especially shocking. Our names are also matched perfectly. The people and meaning behind it. Why am I keep seeing signs if I think I want to forget about him and move on? He's also the same zodiac sign as my late grandfather, and the majority of a part of his last name is my late grandfather's as well. Like all these things could be just things, but something tells me it's not. Is it all orchestrated by the universe and the ancestors? That's how I feel anyway. I like to get answers and your opinions. Thank you, and sending love. When I gained the ability to stop time without ever aging, I did so immediately for a year, fulfilling every desire to my heart's content. I was so confused why so many were cold to me when I began time again, until, one by one, they recounted watching all the things I did when they were frozen, to who and how many times. Someone is Watching Me by Brilliant Bex 1992. So I've never posted on the sub, though I have other stories I buried deep until recently, but this is happening in the present. I've had people stalk and follow me before, and because of that and my true crime addiction, I've become supremely paranoid and a solid curtain twitcher. I, 31 female, reside in an upstairs room that was my first room to myself as a child. I had to leave a bad situation and therefore ended up back at my childhood home. For reference, when our house was built, we were told that the field to our left, with horses and a barn at the time, would one day soon be a development. That was 2000 when we were told that. And it wasn't until 2022 that the road started being formed and a foundations laid. I had already had someone follow me home before when I was young, posted about it, but I don't know how to link it. But I was in a different bedroom next door. My parents put in a free library that was right below my window, and nighttime security lights that are very bright and turn on if you're within 20 feet of the side of my house my room is on. I'll admit, having an open field next to me so long made me accustomed to not closing my curtains when I change, because there was never anyone to watch. Now there is. For the past 2 weeks, the burglar lights next to the free library have been going off late at night. Because my one side of the curtain is open so I can use my vape, that's the only reason I noticed it at all. I don't think too much of it at first. We lock all the doors and windows every night, and I'm on the second floor. I also always look out to see if it was a car, someone walking their dog, or a deer, only to see nothing. To add, they put in a shit ton of streetlights around this area, so visibility is great. But it just kept happening. So last night I did my usual. I saw the lights come on out of my peripherals. I acted natural, giving full view out the window. I was going to bed. It was about 3 a.m. Turned the TV off, closed the window and curtains, turned the lights out. Then I ducked down, peering through the curtain to the sidewalk below. I honestly thought I was going to pass out when after a few minutes, maybe 5, someone comes out from the side of my house, all silhouette, dressed in black. They kept their back to me until the light turned off, but I swear I could still see them standing there, looking up like they could see me. I called the police, but while I was on the phone with the operator, I saw him run off. There wasn't much they could do, except say that they have a car drive around and look. My parents are asleep, and I know I have to tell them tomorrow. This scares the crap out of me. If it hadn't been happening for weeks and was a sole incident, I would probably be fine about it. But the fact that that light has been going off without me seeing activity, and what happened tonight, makes me think this person's been watching me and watching my house. The person outside my window, let's please never fucking meet. Small update. I did tell my parents, and at first they brushed me off, claiming I had a couple drinks and it was late, so I probably just saw someone checking out the library. I then had another conversation about this with my dad, who said that there had been reports the last couple of weeks of car break-ins, and since my car is parked on my side of the street right outside my window, maybe they were trying to break into it. I pointed out that if he was trying to get into my car, why was he pressed up against the house where he wasn't visible from my window? And why did he at no point go towards my car? I think I freaked him out enough that we're going to potentially get a camera for that area, given all the development happening around us. I think it's smart even without this incident. Thank you all for your advice and replies. I'll update here again if anything happens. And there is no other updates. I hope you picked a movie that's actually scary this time. My brother scoffs while taking a swig of his beer. Don't worry, this one will definitely get a reaction out of you, I replied before putting on the recording of his girlfriend being kidnapped. What Was Unseen by Pumpkin Man 35. My family has always been big on Halloween. Our homes are decorated, we walk the streets when we were kids, and host costume parties now that we're older. I've got lots of good memories of the nights with my 2 older brothers, mother, and friends. But there's one particular story that we still frequently relate on Halloween via family group message nowadays that was not pleasant as others. A downright chilling experience that has forever embedded itself in our collective reflections. October 31st, 1991. I had turned 2 in June and was already in my own bedroom, which was the designated nursery beforehand. We lived in a suburb of Houston, Texas that is today a curved row of houses, but back then was a densely forested area. There was a large window in my room that looked across to the backyard and into the woods beyond. On this particular Halloween, the moon was in a waning crescent shape and projected just enough light to see by. I had a big plastic cutout jack-o'-lantern hanging by a thumbtack on my wall. Thin traces of splintered moonlight draped onto its big grinning face. An eerie setting indeed for what is still my favorite night of the year. My mom, brothers, and I were all worn out after a lengthy candy excursion that went well after our usual bedtime. My 2 siblings had their own rooms, and my parents were watching Night of the Living Dead in the living room. I laid beneath the covers, taking in the sounds of the swirling ceiling fan overhead. My drifting eyes looked towards my window. That's when I heard it, a faint scratching, like pawing of a kitten on glass doors. Only we didn't have a kitten, and there certainly wasn't a glass door in my room. I stirred fully back awake, wondering what that sound was. I listened carefully to the gentleness of the silence. The swirling of the ceiling fan, Barbara's scream from the living room television. A symphony of horns burst to life as she was chased to her car by a horde of undead. Then it came again, a scratching sound like fingernails at the base of my window now. I looked towards the window. Nothing there. Slithers of Halloween moonlight pressing through the treetops and rustling into my bedroom. It came again, from something wholly unseen. A ghost? A murderer? This thing my brothers told me about called the boogeyman? Some other creature from the deep recesses of the forest? Scratching, trying to break in, trying to eat me, murder me, or zap me to a planet unknown. Scratch. The invisible fingers of something that could only be lurking on the other side of my window. Finally, I couldn't restrain myself any longer. I screamed, like a 2.5-year-old has never screamed like before. My mother came charging into my room, bursting the door open like a firefighter. I cried out to her that there was something at my window, and it was trying to get in. She heard the scratching sound too. Alarmed, she turned on the light and raced to the window. Nothing. No ghosts, no murderers, no boogeyman. Not even a lizard or moth. Not even a tree limb. But still, scratched. My mom called for my dad, and by this time my brothers were rushing into our room too with pop guns in their hands. My dad stepped inside, hearing the scratching sounds as well. He went to the window beside my mom, but turned about when he too saw nothing outside. Yet again, scratch, scratch, scratch. Finally, we saw what it was. Scraping the wall just above my bed, just above my head, the plastic cutout of the grinning jack-o'-lantern. It moved in the wind my ceiling fan, the thumbtack having loosened its grip somehow. My dad took it down and the scratching suddenly ceased. What a fright it was, though, on that Halloween night. My brothers still enjoy poking fun at me about it, although none of us are below the age of 30 anymore. "Is it a girl or a boy, my dear?" asked a lady whose hair I had just styled. "I'm having a baby boy," I answered excitedly with my back turned, placing my comb back in my hairstyling kit, while forgetting that I was a mortuary cosmetologist. Creepy Woman in Empty Business Park by Blondie Cake 7. Many years ago, when my daughter was potty trained, a friend recommended I keep a travel potty with me. It saved me from rushing to find a restroom and avoid stopping in anywhere questionable with a toddler. We would drive about 40 minutes to pick up my husband on his lunch break. That afternoon, we'd head back to drop him off at work, and we're only about a block from the restaurant when my daughter said she had to go. The area we would just head into was a large business park and are a lot of very large buildings to the left and right. I saw one and the parking lot looked empty. I pulled over to the side of the building and parked at the curb. I had 2 car seats taking out the back seat and my husband in the passenger seat, so I took my daughter out of the car and set her up in the trunk so she could use the potty. I had just got her settled, and she was looking uncomfortable and covering her face and looking down. I looked behind me, and I see a woman walking up to me. It was summer at the time and very warm. She was wearing a jean skirt and a tank top and had a crossbody purse. She looked at my daughter and said, "Don't be embarrassed, we all go through it," and laughed. She said she needed a ride to the freeway and asked if I could take her. I told her that I was sorry, but I couldn't. She started to seem bothered and asked why I couldn't take her. I said my back seat is full, so I don't have room for her. She snapped back, "So you're telling me you put your daughter in the front seat?" I told her no, that was my husband was in the front seat. As soon as she heard that I wasn't alone and had my husband with me, she started slowly backing away and walking down the street she came from. As she was walking away, she said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I used to be from here, but not anymore," and quickly walked off. If she would have made a left on the cross street she was walking towards when going towards my car, there was a restaurant and gas stations a block up. Plenty of people to ask for a ride. I'm still so grateful my husband was with me that day. I don't know what her true intentions were, but getting to a populated area didn't seem to be one of them. When the angels ascended from on high, they told us that we were mistaken. God didn't make us in His image. As they pulled out their knives, they informed us that He made us from His recipe book. The Family's Haunted Barn by Anonymoose. Hello, never posted here before, but I thought it would be fun to tell some spooky stories for the Halloween season. So, for some background, the barn has been my family for 2 generations. My grandparents and now my uncle. Someone did unalive themselves by hanging in the barn before they lived there. Female screams have been heard near the barn, I do not have many spooky stories. They are mostly my dad's as he grew up there. Plausible explanations at the bottom. One day, my dad was messing around with a football in the barn. He threw it into the loft only for it to come back to him in a perfect spiral. He threw the ball while yelling up to whoever was up there. No one answered, but the ball came back. He kept playing catch for around a minute until the ball didn't come back. He climbed the ladder and only saw hay. My dad was playing cops and robbers in the barn with his friends, and they decided that the gutter was for the people who got caught. The gutter was a slightly lower part on the inside of the barn for manure. My dad was caught and was standing in the gutters when he saw a red light seeping up from the grates. He and his friends panicked and ran out. My dad was part of the tough crowd in high school. Halloween was coming up and they weren't scared of ghosts. They pulled together and brought a Ouija board. Of course, the barn was a perfect place to go. Someone had died there after all. They placed their hands on the planchette and watched in fear as it started to move. They freaked out, jumped away from the board, leaving it there as they raced back to the house. One friend swore the ghost had followed him home. The teen refused to sleep alone for weeks after. He slept between his parents. When he was 17, my dad was getting ready to move out and join the army. He had to get rid of his motorcycle as he didn't have a place to store it. He had found a buyer and was showing him the bike. It was kept in a small underground offshoot of the barn. As they were talking over, the old half-broken radio suddenly started blaring organ music. My dad was a rock lover, and he had never listened to anything else. The two guys were spooked and ran out as fast as they could. My dad checked out the radio the next day and saw the switch was in the opposition, still covered in dust. From the way the story is told, it seems like the radio could have also had a cassette player and he only listened to his tapes, which is why the organ music freaked him out so much. This is the only story that actually freaked him out, and it's just because of the music. When I was little, my uncle had put up a rope in the middle of the barn, tying it to a rafter. All of us cousins had been born pretty close together, so leaping from a hayloft like Tarzan seemed to be a good way to keep all of us kids occupied. I ran to the barn being everyone else. I grabbed the rope and clung to it with my hands and feet to cement my first place. Suddenly, small black things fell from above us. A few fell onto my head. After a moment of shock, we looked around us and saw dead bats. They littered the floor around us. Answers. For the first story, I don't know. Weird bouncing against the hay. Number 1, about the football. I don't know. Some weird bouncing against the hay. Story number 2, about the weird glow. Probably some bacteria in a previously rainy day. Story number 3, about the Ouija board. Someone was playing pranks and one of the teens was a wuss. Number 4, about the radio. The radio was broken. It was probably also Mr. Crowley. I believe that's a rock song with organ music in it. Number 5, about the rope. Bats nest on the rope, pulled at it, probably loosened it, causing all the baby bats to fall and die. The nest just probably got stuck before it came down too. Answers for the women's screams have gotta be cougars. And these stories, well, they add in the comments, so let me keep going. I love to pretend like the barn was haunted. My dad also doesn't believe in ghosts. We had fun coming up with reasonable explanations for scary stories. Well, reasonable to us. Everyone has spooky stories, though. Extra unrelated supernatural stories just for fun. My mom is an avid believer of aliens. She has seen a few drones zip away at speeds greater than should be possible. I suspect the military is doing things. One strange time, though, she was in a plane with my sister. My sister has aphantasia, meaning she can't picture images in her mind. She is also, unrelatedly, extremely uncreative and no nonsense. In the plane window, they saw a strange metal structure, almost like a power plant in the sky. Now, planes tend to fly above 20,000 feet above ground. So what was this strange structure? Asking my mom, and she says aliens. Ask my sister, and she just shrugs. My only explanation is that the clouds and the light messed with their eyes, or they were closer to the ground than they thought. When I was 13, I was in this hotel. During my stay there, in every reflection, I saw bloody limbs. The mirror, the windows, the doorknob, the dresser handles, the paintings. They felt kind and like one being. There were so many of them, and they wanted me to join them. I wanted to join them, but I couldn't figure out a way to rip my limbs off and die. I was probably just hallucinating. I see things that didn't exist like 3 times before, so I'm pretty sure I was just hallucinating sometimes, but those times aren't as interesting or spooky. I used to cross-country ski with my dad a lot in high school. One early day, it was snowing. We were the first ones on the trail. We were so excited to be the first ones to make tracks. We skied far out there. We usually would ski for up to 4 hours on weekends. We liked a distant race. About 2/3 through the route, we noticed the strange tracks. We knew they had just been made as the snow was fresh. The tracks looked almost like a deer, but bigger and with claws. The path torted along the ski trail for a bit before jumping back into the woods. Had we spooked it? I don't know. We couldn't figure out what had made the tracks, so I took a horrid photo. Phone cameras weren't as good, and my phone was old. And showed it to my teacher, who knew animals in the area. He thought it was a fake. I knew it couldn't be, as we were the only ones out there. I think I've actually got a post about it. Well, I still don't know what it was. It could have been an animal far from home. Once when I was, I believe, 15 or 16, I had a strange and very long dream. This dream lasted years. It dropped out of high school, married my high school sweetheart. We had a beautiful child and a girl and a boy. Something happened and she died. It's been a while since I had this dream, and dreams fade quickly, but I believe she died during our son's birth. I had no education and worked construction. It was tough being a single parent to my kids, but I loved them so much. My daughter was as brilliant as her mother. She got all A's, and I knew she would be in college. I saved up what I could for them. I could tell there was something wrong with me, though. My body wasn't working like it should. I came from a family of farmers and hunters and mechanics. We were built strong. I wasn't as strong as I used to be. I put off doctor's visits, though. I was a man, and men don't need help. One day I slipped on a ladder and took a nasty fall. I had to go to the doctor. When I was there, they realized something was off. They ran some tests and came back to me, explaining that my muscles were atrophied. I had some sort of disease and I wouldn't be able to work construction anymore. I watched my body wither away in front of me. My daughter, bound for greatness, took a gap year after high school to care for me and our little brother. My bills were stacking up. I couldn't work. I was bringing my family down. I was the man. I was supposed to be the provider. Their college savings were wasted on me. I was going to die anyways. Every hunter has a gun. I woke up with a grim determination. I knew I had to make the right choice. Well, some may think I was trapped in another world. I just think I was another weird dream, albeit a bit of a long one. This is getting long, so this is the last one. I went to Machu Picchu. We hiked up to a taller point for photos, but didn't enter the area yet. The next day, we entered, and I vomited all over the sacred land. The tour guide freaked out about it a bit. He also decided I had been sacrificed there. The first thing I remember watching as a child was a Machu Picchu doc. And ever since then, I've been obsessed. I know so many facts about it and always wanted to go. It just so happened that they were able to visit on the winter solstice, an extremely important day for Incan people. There is a special area the light shines through on only the winter and summer solstice, and my birthday. As soon as we exited the sacred grounds, my vomiting stopped and I was okay. Probably height sickness, forgot what it's called, as I will sometimes throw up when at heights. It was just weird, as the day before we were even higher and I was fine. Home is where the heart is, they say. But I've got like 15 of them under my floorboards now, and I don't think the sound of them still beating or helping my anxiety like at all. A memory of when my home was broken into, but it wasn't correct. It was worse. By the Bear of Wisdom. Okay, recently I've been having troubles with kids knocking on my door and running. I have severe PTSD, so this was causing me some issues at home. So I was in contact with a police officer in the area who my mother knew. We met up at a coffee shop to discuss what I was to do to make myself feel safer. This was going fine until my mother brought up an old story about when our house was broken into. My memory on this, waking up Christmas and only having one thing because everything else was taken. I was too young to really remember it, but I'm 35 and not one person has spoken to me about it since childhood. So I just thought my version was correct, except it really wasn't. What actually happened was, my mother woke up in the night having heard a noise. She knew there was a burglar in the area because my uncle next door had his Christmas presents stolen. This is where I had just confused myself. She got up in the dark and went next door to my room to pick me up. I was around 2 years old and was wide awake, just staring up in my cot, wide-eyed. My mother flicked on the lights and I said something about a man. She freaked out and we were alone in the house, and when she looked down, she saw a little patch of burned carpet and a spent match. They come in through downstairs, lit matches, and just dropped them still lit. While they were walking around, she could follow the entire trail from the back of the house to my room. Back to the present, I was staring at my mother in the coffee shop, coffee halfway to my face, and she's like, "What?" I said, "I do not recall this. I recall something else." Told her quickly, and she was like, "Oh, no, that was your uncle. We nearly died in a house fire." And I had a fucking existential crisis right there because I've been deathly afraid of fires all my life, to the point of night terrors as a little kid, with no explanation. Now, I get it. Fuck's sakes. "Look, Mommy, a shooting star! Make a wish!" the child exclaimed as her mother held her tightly, looking up into the night sky. As the asteroid entered the atmosphere, the mother closed her eyes and wished that this wasn't the end. Close Call by Improvement OK 3248. Decided to share a few more experiences in life. This one happened back in my first year of high school. You can't just move anyone into a neighborhood without a background check. I can't even recall how many times I've said this to people and how many times I've been told that's an old saying. I lived in a small town all my life, and the only crimes you ever heard of was robberies of stores and houses. Murders, kidnappings, and big crimes of those types were extremely rare in the 2000s and going forward, but in the 90s it was a different story. To get back on track. Even then, someone knew something. If you don't see or hear anyone around at that time, that didn't mean someone wasn't watching. Everyone knew each other, and if someone didn't know you, they knew most or all of your family members. But everyone, young and old in this small town, can and will agree on this. If someone is an outsider, everyone is on high alert. I've seen a few newcomers in our small town. I would hear a huge majority of people trying to figure out who they were and even telling my generation and below to be careful and watch our backs. And me and my sister did. We stayed at home and never left without our mom or stepdad in tow. They made sure of it. Some new people moved in across the street from our place. We didn't care since we stayed in the house 90% of the time unless it was to go handle business, groceries, and the like. As stated, no one knew these people, so quite a few people in our town were on high alert. And they were right to be. Back then, it was safe to go out at night and the older people could sit on their porches without worry. We went to the store for snacks and some frozen pizza to eat one night around 6 to 7 p.m. since no one felt like cooking. We were turning in. I always watch our surroundings, and this night I was doing that too. I saw a man wearing dark blue jeans and a black shirt. I couldn't tell what material it was, messing with our apartment door. I got my sister and mother off who were talking. Why is there a dude at our door? By then, my mother noticed him too. Since we had the headlights on, no other lights of anyone else's apartment were on except for the building across the street. And even then, only the first floor, first apartment on the left if you're facing the building outside light was on. And there was a man, leaning against the wall close to the breezeway, watching. "Let's go ahead and get out while the man is right there," my mother said, grabbing her weapon as she told me and my sister to stay close to her. It was then that the guy started walking towards the middle of the road, looking anxious as he shoved his hands into his pants pocket. I tried to look at his face. He kept it turned away from us, looking around the apartment complex as if he was looking for someone. We got to Complex C, Breezeway. That's when I saw the guy who was at our door hurrying from around the building to head back across the street. I didn't say anything until we got into the house. Turned out the guy watching was on lookout, and upon noticing our car returning, tried to warn his friend who was at our door. We locked up, made sure everything was still in place before my mom told me to barricade the door. We've been doing that for some time, but I'll admit I had some nights where I didn't because I was super tired or sore from gym class working out with weights and such. That night, I did it immediately, and the following few days, nothing happened. A week or so passed before the big thing occurred. Up until that night, I barricaded the door without question. I worked out, so I was sore all over. My mom was firm in making me barricade the door. My sister nor her wanted to do it. And my stepdad was at work, so it was up to me. I admit I lazed around till around 9:30, 10 p.m. before doing it and heading to bed. The next morning, we did our normal routine and left to drop me off at school. My mom was locking the door, at least tried to. "What the hell?" I heard her say, making me turn around to see her struggling with a lock that was completely loose. She fumbles with it, trying to put the lock back into place. Nothing was working, and she was getting frustrated. It was clear someone took our deadbolt off, or at least tried to before giving up and trying to fix it to make it seem like nothing was wrong. She tried to fix it, gave up, and despite me telling her not to take me to school, she took me in anyway. We were all worried and anxious. I mean, our doorknob was loose, anyone could walk in, but it was fixed to seem like nothing was actually wrong. Mom picked up my stepdad from work, told him what was going on, and the maintenance man came to fix the door later that day. Everyone's door was changed with new locks and even deadbolts. No one was happy, but the manager didn't care. On top of that, the gossipers were talking about a resident in Complex D had abruptly moved. We didn't find out until some days later. Someone reported about the woman having 2 guys living with her who were known criminals and not on her lease due to past arrests for break-ins. No one knew where she and the guys went, and they just truly up and left. Over dinner, while my sister washed dishes, my stepdad was talking about everything to a close friend who worked on the police force. After the call, he and my mom talked, and he said, "What if those guys were the ones trying to break in, and that's why the lock was broken?" We all stayed silent. Me looking at my mom, who looked from me to my dad as we silently let the pieces fall into place. I felt dread in my bones. If I never forced myself to barricade the door that night and just went straight to bed, where would me, my sister, and mom be now? As we extracted a perfectly preserved Neanderthal head from the glacier, one researcher cut his hand on its teeth and suddenly passed out, not breathing. While the team medic performed CPR, I stared in shock at the head's still moving jaw, only snapping out of it by the medic's screams as the researcher bit into her face. Several years ago, my car changed colors by Professional Ear 5923. Just stumbled across a subreddit, so I thought I'd share one of the, quite frankly, many odd and unexplainable experiences I've had over my lifetime. This would have happened in 2018. Honestly, isn't it odd that so many people have stories from that exact same time frame? Perusing the sub, I noticed that the year seems to be prominent. Anyways, I had this car, a blue 2001 Volkswagen Jetta TDI. It's the car I learned how to drive on. It's honestly didn't get as much use by this time period and kind of just sat there. But I knew that car like the back of my hand. Even though I didn't drive it often anymore, my friends and I would often use it as a sort of hangout spot, as I lived in a small trailer at the time with my parents and 2 siblings. There wasn't much privacy in that place. This wasn't once or twice. We hang out in that car all of the time, pretty much nightly, as I was always with friends getting up to some sort of trouble at that point in my life. We're hanging out in the car as recently as the night before. In fact, I remember this quite well. That's why it's bizarre. The next morning, upon glancing outside the window of my then home, I noticed that the car was not blue, but green. I took the shortest and most incredulous glance at the thing and had to do a double take. In that moment, I experienced the most surreal feeling, something akin to deja vu, but with increased intensity followed by this wave of fear, adrenaline almost, like I just witnessed something dire or terrifying. I can't really explain my reaction now. My stomach just dropped for a moment. I called all my friends over to look at my car, and they remarked how they could have sworn it was blue as well, one of them without even me prompting to do so. I hadn't yet told him what was wrong when I said we were going to go check on my car. This is something that has bothered not just me, but everyone else I used to hang out with in that car for a long time now. We even did some digging and unfortunately found that all previous photos of the vehicle, it never appeared to be blue. It was always green. There is one discrepancy though, and it's the title. The title says the car is blue. This entire experience was disturbing in a very odd way, from the emotions it invoked, as well as the questions I still now, years later, about how something like this even happens. I've had a lot more stories to share from this exact time period as well, and I can't wait to share all of them with you as a member here. I was always told that dogs are so forgiving, and that you could beat them and they'd still love you. It wasn't until my husband told me how good of a puppy I was that I realized how true that statement really was. My social security card was stolen out of my room 8 years ago and came back last week by imrebaMcEntired. My social security card was stolen out of my room about 8 years ago. I came home from work one day and I kept it inside a safe in my closet. I noticed my room had been torn apart, the safe was busted open. This was a cheap key Walmart type safe, nothing major. And the first thing I noticed was my social security card was gone. I was so confused because I lived with roommates at the time. Those roommates were like family to me. Never suspected it was something they would have done. I eventually found out it was one of my roommate's brothers. He was visiting the house for a few days and had a history of trouble. I knew it had to be him. This is the weird part. I confronted the brother of my roommate about it one night. He was shocked and upset when I did. He admitted to me that he took it, and he said he was sorry. I asked him why he did it, and he said he was involved in a scamming ring and thought I'd be an easy target. He then said that he felt so bad about taking my personal information that he panicked and threw it into a sewer drain to get rid of it all. I was upset that he did this, but I moved past that and years went by. About 2 weeks ago, I was cleaning out my book bag that I use daily. I have 2 of my older wallets inside there with random school IDs and other things. Note, I have thoroughly checked these wallets many times in the past 8 years and have never seen it. So I pulled these wallets out and I wanted to check and see what was inside them. I pulled a stack of school IDs out and behind them was my actual social security card that I thought had been stolen and missing for the past 8 years. I probably wouldn't have thought anything of it after finding it more than me just finding it, although I have checked the wallet many times and the person who took it from me admitted he did and apologized saying he threw it in the sewer drain. Just interesting to me and I wanted to share it. The fortune teller said that drinking would be the end of me. So I focused on my health and quit alcohol forever. But just before I went under for a routine operation, I could smell the liquor on the anesthesiologist's breath as he asked me to count backwards from 10. The Weird Banana Peel and Clock Setting by Anonymoose. This happened about 10 years ago, but the daylight saving post from earlier jogged my memory. My husband, infant daughter, and I lived together in a small apartment. We had a clock on the wall in our living room that we never adjusted for daylight savings time. It had been an hour off for months. Rather than change it, we just joked about it all the time. We rarely relied on the analog clock anyway. Plus, eventually, it would be correct again. One day, I got home from a morning outing with my daughter, and I noticed that a banana peel was in the hall on the floor. This was very strange because we did not have any bananas in our house. In fact, we never did. I was quite startled. I sent a text to my husband and asked him if he stopped by home during his shift and possibly dropped a banana peel on the floor. He said he most certainly had not. We checked our Ring doorbell footage and no one had come into our apartment. I cleaned it up. I was feeling uneasy. I packed a diaper bag for my daughter so we could leave for the afternoon. Before we walked out the door, I glanced at our clock. The time was correct. It had been adjusted for the time change. I was startled. I checked my phone to be sure, and sure enough, the clock had been adjusted. I grabbed my daughter and her bag and left. Once we got safely to the car, I messaged my husband to ask if he had adjusted the clock. He had not. When we got home that evening, my husband thought I had been messing with him. I still can't explain what happened. My husband is not one for practical jokes, and this would be a very weird practical joke to play. I always felt like it was a little glitch in the Matrix. That or something more sinister, but my brain prefers the former. I pulled my daughter into the bathroom where I was hiding, explained that I too heard my voice calling her from downstairs. She broke free from my grip and ran out the door screaming, "It's up here!" I switched places again, and this time I'm stuck, a little freaked out. By Almost-Jaded. I'm actually really glad I found this sub a few weeks ago, because if this happened without me hanging out here the last few weeks, I'd probably be handling it much more poorly. As it is, I'm merely very concerned and freaked out, but holding it together. I have posted here for a couple of weeks now. Ever since I had my second serious glitch in roughly 11 years, and a friend pointed me here. Ever since that day, I've been more aware of these things, and I've made a few posts about them. Other than the big one in 2016 and December 29, 2017, I've always written the little ones off. Now, I pay attention. And the last two weird things, nowhere near the scale of the two major experiences, I posted here. And because today, I got a major oh shit confirmation that something changed. To review, if you haven't seen or heard the other posts. In 2006, I was driving through North Las Vegas and went to a parallel place where the streets were different. I eventually came back to my universe, or however you want to look at it. But it's not something I'll ever forget. A few weeks ago, the same thing happened again in a different part of town. I drove through an area I'm extremely familiar with, and everything was off. very off. An entire planned community and all its associated streets and a shopping center had vanished. And streets that don't intersect in my universe intersected because the development wasn't in the way. Again, eventually came out of it, and going back, everything was how it was supposed to be again. The two glitches I posted since were minor. A speaker that had JBL logo on it changed to a Harman Kardon, and last night an Uber Eats customer swore I had been her Uber driver for the airport once. And I recall details about our conversation that couldn't have been coincidence. But I've never made airport drives or even Uber passenger rides, only ever done food deliveries. Again, very weird, but little stuff. Tonight, I just confirmed that somewhere along the line, I actually switched into a different place, and there's no getting around it. Leaving Planet Hollywood, ex-wife in the car with me, we work together. She's born and raised Vegas. I've lived here roughly 18 years now. We both know this city better than we know the back of our own hands. We're heading from Planet Hollywood to Spring Mountains Road to get to a destination in West Vegas towards Summerlin. Details so any locals reading/listening can relate and verify things. As we get to the Strip, I go straight across on Harmon instead of turning onto the Strip. She looked at me funny and asked me where I'm going. I'm either going to take the freeway or just follow Harmon west and take Valley View or Dexter. How? Why are you staying on Harmon? Why wouldn't I? She looked at me weird. So here's the thing. I'm planning to either take Herman Viaduct they built when City Center went up, over the Valley View like I've done 100 times, or take the auxiliary ramp from the said viaduct onto Frank Sinatra Access to the I-15 like I've also done 100 times, depending on traffic. Except after passing City Center, it becomes immediately obvious why she thought I was crazy. There are no auxiliary ramps from the viaduct, and Harmon dead ends just past the very short viaduct. This is not how the road has gone for the last 8 or so years of my life. In my universe, part of the City Center project included a huge expansion of Herman Road through there, including a large viaduct that went over the freeway and another bridge over the train tracks that previously broke up the Little Herman Road into pieces, making it a significant thoroughfare, complete with ramps from said viaduct down to Frank Sinatra and freeway access on one side of 15 and access to James Dean Boulevard on the other. Also, I've been looking at maps and the bridge over the train tracks isn't a thing. Harmon, west of the freeway, is still the ragtag little street that stops and starts several times. They don't exist, and according to the people I've talked to in the last couple of hours, never have. Except they did, for years, at least from wherever the fuck I'm from. I used them both many, many times. So yeah. A little weirded out right now. No, it's not drugs. No, it's not carbon monoxide. No, I'm not diagnosed with schizophrenia or something related. I am high-functioning autistic, technically OPDD, because I'm too high-functioning to be considered autistic or some crap. Whatever, I think differently than others and have weird emotional patterns compared to normative folks, but I made it through 40+ years pretty well so far. Everything else seems to be just as it should be, at least as far as I can tell. But I haven't gone back this time. I'm here, and Harmon Road is different. I planned to tell my husband I was pregnant tomorrow. But when my son from my first marriage went missing, my husband smiled as he stroked my belly and said, "Now we can make room for a real family." Bizarre Helpful Paper Came Out of Nowhere by Sunspot5254. So I work in the mental health field as a case manager. I have a client who just got admitted to the inpatient unit, and I wasn't sure how to contact her in the unit directly, since patients have a different number. I worked here for about a year and had left in July because I was supposed to go back into teaching. Well, it didn't work out, so I started back up on this job 3 weeks ago. But I have lost pretty much all of those niche contact numbers and resources. I remember I had written down the IPU patient contact number line down, different from the front desk, on a piece of paper and shoved it in my work phone case. We have little iPhones and the leather cases that have a few slots for cards and a pocket for money. I turned that case in my old phone months ago when I had resigned, and this is a different one. I remember thinking how old and banged up it was in comparison to my old one, which looked much newer. I figured I'd call the front desk later and get the number, but I thought to myself, oh, I wonder what the last person left in here. Opening the side pocket on the case, and there was a small slip of paper with the IPU patient contact number. It was mine. My handwriting, my font, my size, and it was written on a torn piece of paper from IPU because there was typing on the back about staff expectations while on the unit. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm grateful as hell, and I don't know if I'm looking out for myself somewhere out there. But it was weird. Really, really weird. And I do not have an explanation for it. I have some bad news. Your family all died in the car crash, the nurse stated matter-of-factly, as I awoke in a panic at the hospital, desperately wanting to know about my wife and children. You've survived with retrograde amnesia, though, which means you can't form new memories, or remember that we've started every day with this conversation since the accident 12 years ago. My toddler fell forward onto an open oven door while I was baking and landed several feet away, completely fine. By NibblesMcGiblet. I don't think I've shared this story here, but this is why I joined this subreddit, and my daughter is 21 now. This happened when she was maybe 2.5 years old. I was in the kitchen, which was wide open to living room. Husband was sitting on the couch watching TV, half asleep. Daughter toddling around. I opened the oven door to check on the food and turned to get a pot holder out of the nearby drawer. When I turned back, my daughter was almost to me and suddenly fell forward with her hands out. I shrieked, "Oh God, help!" to my husband, and in that instant, images flashed through my mind of her landing on it, burning herself horrifically. Us going to the emergency room, her being there for a very, very long time, months. Her growing old at various stages, covered in horrible burn scars and scar tissue, limiting the movement in her hands and on her face. Her going through plastic surgery after plastic surgery. Our life became all about hospitals and surgeries. I felt I lived those lifetimes all in an instant. Then Suddenly, I snapped back into the present, and my husband was looking at me saying, "What?" All irritated, and my daughter was on her hands and knees at least 3 feet back from the oven, where she definitely wasn't seconds prior. I said, "She fell and almost landed right on the oven door." And he said, "She's nowhere near there," and just took a sip of his beer. I've never, ever forgotten this. It was a defining moment in my parenting life, despite her being my youngest and me living through a lot. I told her about this when she was an adult, and she was shocked. She didn't remember it happening, and I said, "Well, you wouldn't, because somehow you just fell down, and toddlers do that a lot." And she has told me a few times since how shaken she felt hearing about it, and how it haunts her now, because she feels like that timeline was somehow real and happened, but didn't. I've never been so thankful for a glitch in my life. I've never experienced anything like it, and I still think about it from time to time, and my heart jumps into my throat. I know it happened. There's zero doubt about it. It is what it is. For what he did to my kid years ago, I've had in my basement since then, being subject to the very same atrocities every single day. 2 years back, police found the real culprit, but it was too much fun by then to let this one go. And now the stories have come to an end. If you're still awake, well, I hope you fall asleep shortly. And the sounds that you hear in the background are going to take center stage for no more than 30 minutes to help you fall asleep or stay asleep. But if you are awake and want to hear more stories, I do have playlists for that as well. Sleep tight and don't let 42 bite.